Welcome to Soulful Latte podcast, a weekly conversation between two sisters to help us and our virtual friends online, like yourselves, grow in life and in faith. We are your hosts. I am Qudsiyah.
And I am Samia. Welcome to episode 8. I can't believe we made it at the end of the season. And actually, this episode is about on the lessons we've learned from this season. And the first thing I want to mention is the fact that we are going to be talking about these lessons multiple times. This is actually a second recording for this. We thought that it was all done and over with, but we were about to talk about exactly what this podcast taught us, and probably patience is one of those things. How was your reaction, Qudsiyah, after doing these lessons one more time?
Yeah, because the first one that we did was supernatural.
But you know what? It's the final one.
I've just let it go now, but I need to bring it all back, and yeah, it's very interesting. But that's fine.
Well, if you guys are curious, we actually had a good a podcast. It was recorded perfectly. I mean, we said perfect words, but the audio or something was very glitchy and it just didn't work out well. So we're going to do this again. And actually, this is probably a good thing because now we can, last time we recorded this, it was maybe 2-3 weeks back. And so we can inject some of the even more new lessons we've learned because now everyone is kind of into this new year mindset, even though it is a little bit far. But I think it should be very useful now to inject those lessons that we've learned so far. And obviously, I could start with my lessons that I've learned, but because it's a second recording and I'm still a little bit annoyed, Qudsiyah, please go with yours. So what is the first thing that you learned from this podcast, from the season, and life in general?
So, number 1 would be embracing discomfort, big time. So, this podcast has been in my vision for 3 years. But doing this podcast has been so out of my comfort zone. I remember the first episodes still, Samia, when everything went wrong and we came out of the episode drained and said, you know what, we need a better system. It's okay. And I remember spending even 5 hours.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just been really a journey of growth for me because I can laugh here right now, but when I think about the first episode, I know I was so robotic because it took everything out of me to say words and know that it's being recorded. So, alhamdulillah, it's been a good growth journey for me.
Talking about growth and stuff, the first one I want to share is about companionship. And this is something that we've kind of done together. We knew each other a little bit on Instagram, but obviously I think we know each other a lot more through this podcast. We've seen each other impatient, we've seen annoyance, we've seen excited. So we've seen all of that. And in this podcast and a little bit in life, I am really learning this idea of suhbah, of friendship, and trusting relationship with those who I care about and those who care about me. Trusting those people, that's something that I really do struggle with. A lot of things come into play. We've talked about some of them, I think, in the podcast earlier, in another podcast. But yeah, this idea of friendship and just trusting someone. And in this podcast, it's such a trusting thing because we got into this together and we just had to trust each other. There was nothing else that we could have done. It was like, I'm going to trust you to do your part. I'm going to do my part. And then we're going to launch it in January, And so there was definitely a big trust thing, and that's something that I'm learning in life in general too.
It's been so heart-fulfilling to have grown this friendship as well over the podcast. Number 2 for me would be done is better than perfect, and you'd relate to this, Samia. We've had quite a few long days and just moments of things not working out. But it's really reminded me and taught me once again that mistakes will happen, things will go wrong, and that is okay. We just need to learn from them and try again tomorrow. It's okay that things are not perfect because perfect doesn't exist. We can do the best that we can with what we have right now and leave the rest to Allah. The most important thing is to do it 100% and with your heart and sincerity and with the right intentions, and then leave it. And it's okay that things go wrong. We'll just do better next time. And it's happened for us as well, where we've just had to step back and try again.
Yes, and I'm so grateful that we both are good at that, actually. We're like, oh, today was rough, whatever, we just wipe the slate clean, and then we just start re-recording, and that's fine. That's just the progress of life. And for the second one for me is, how we explore difficult topics, and how we really did explore some very difficult topics. And I had to kind of dig in and share a little bit of my vulnerabilities as well. And I learned through that is that, sometimes allowing a listening, evaluating ear is the way to grow. I think when we go through some things in life, we hold it in because we're afraid of judgment, we're afraid of shame, we're afraid of what people are going to think about us. And I think sometimes you just need, in that trusting relationship, you need someone to listen to it and give you a fresh perspective and just put yourself out there. And I think what that also, it does help us to grow and help us to really, become better version of ourselves. But it also creates beautiful relationships. I can speak from my experience. I mean, marriage is a huge deal when you're living with a stranger for the first time. And I've learned this year, or this past year, I should say, that we grew a lot with each other once we started sharing those little things that we were afraid to share with anyone. And that's so important, and those relationships are worth it. Obviously be careful, but then do it, definitely.
It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable because you're putting yourself out there to be exposed. But that is where power is. That is where connection is. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. And you're right, listening creates so much more learning as well from someone else. Which leads very nicely into my third lesson, which is the importance of communication.
Right.
And letting the other person know what is important to you. And also listening and opening up that space for transparency. So for us, from the beginning, from when the idea was planted, we've spoken about pretty much everything that is important to us. Because when you speak about what's important to you and put it on the table, both parties are aware and you can be conscious of that as your journey goes on. And I think that really makes for a beautiful start to something, or just a beautiful journey together as well. What do you think?
I agree. I think I was so proud of us. I am so proud of us that we have this open communication between us, that we have these expectations from each other, and we are able to listen to things, and adjust ourselves accordingly. And in any relationship, that is such a blessing. That's one thing. For instance, I can go back in time a little bit, and in my college years, I was rooming with someone. It was just one person, and in the beginning, we had this conversation about what to expect, what not to expect, blah, blah, blah. And she was always, on me for things that I didn't do well. And that was so important because I would not have known that it was making her uncomfortable if she hadn't told me. So yeah, we definitely have to be open to communication because it really does create a beautiful relationship. My third thing for this would be something that we talked about actually in one of the podcasts, which was about knowing your why and the importance of visiting it and revisiting it every time. And while we're talking about our little struggles with this podcast, obviously I think probably not intentionally. I didn't find myself doing it intentionally, but I think I did do it without knowing about it, just being like, okay, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? I mean, it's not easy to record. It's not easy to sit and edit and do all those other things when you have this live chaos happening around you. But we just have to find your why and just connect to it. And that spoke a lot to me. And that really reminds me of the story. I heard it I don't know, it has to be more than 8 years ago. But I just remember it. It was from a student talking about his teacher in a very Islamic setting. And he was talking about a sheikh, actually. He was escorting him from the hotel to the venue. And he said that he witnessed him stop in front of the door, of the hotel door. Like he closed it and he still had his hand on the handle. And he paused for a couple of seconds and then he continued. And the student was very observant about that. And he asked the sheikh, he was like, hey, why did you do that? Like, what was that little moment? Like, what were you thinking about? Are you hungry or something? Like, you think about those things. But the sheikh was like, I just had to make an intention at that point. He had to stop, and he's going in front of so many people. That can be really tap for spirituality. And so he just stopped for a moment, and he just made that, connected himself with Allah, made that intention. And so that is the knowing your why, to honor those actions by making that intention all the time.
SubhanAllah, thank you for sharing that. Just the importance of renewing your action every now and again to maintain that sincerity in your action as well. That's such a good reminder. And we've spoken about intentions in one of the episodes as well. Let's speak about the big things that we've learned that we would like to carry forward with us. What would be yours?
Mine, actually, I think I was very impacted by the book I read. I talked insanely about it on my Instagram. I know that. People probably got sick and tired of it. But it was such an amazing book, The Beginning of Guidance by Imam Ghazali. And one thing he said over there was that you are not important whatsoever. Regardless of whatever situation and environment that you're in, you are the least important person. And let me tell you, and I'm sure you guys understand, and how difficult that is to be. You can be in an airport line where everyone is waiting for the same thing, but then you just feel entitled. Why are they not doing this for me? It's so hard to do that, but the reality is that you are the last important person. And so the big thing I learned was communicate with everyone. So I'm talking with everyone with the knowledge that I am the last important person in this room. And whatever they say is more important. Whatever they're doing is more important. Their existence is more important, And that is such a huge ego crusher and has been very instrumental to my views about life, actually, recently.
That is so interesting. To be the last person in the room, to think of yourself last, but not in like a self-crushing way.
Mm-hmm. One of the episodes that we did was about self-worth, and we talked about that idea that Allah has honored everyone. So I'm looking at the person in the room and myself, not, through my own lens, but from Allah's lens. And I'm saying that the person who's sitting across from me, Allah has honored him. And he's probably better than I am in some ways that I don't understand. Maybe he will be better one day. Maybe he's done something that he's so loved by Allah. So it's not about giving you more importance in that way, but it's about honoring that person and really humbling myself in that. I don't know everything, and he just might be more loved by Allah. If not now, then maybe 10 years from now.
So thought-provoking to know that Allah has honored us in so many ways, and we can all learn from one another. The best thing I find is that I can't be the judge of how good someone is, because that is reserved with Allah. The only thing that is the basis of judgment is reserved with Allah. It's what we can't see. And that's quite beautiful. That's giving me a lot of things to think about. So inshallah, I'll be thinking about that.
What about you? What are your things, the big things?
2 things that I've learned for the past 9 or 11 months is really the concept of acceptance, more to do with people and where they are on their journey. And that could be different from mine, but that is okay because each has their own, and each will have their own time to grow, and each will have their own opportunities to grow, because Allah is in control of everything. And even if that is different from me and where I am, that is no reason for me not to think differently of them, but to acknowledge that I am on my journey, they're on their journey, and Allah is the best of planners.
Mm-hmm.
Just really solidifying that understanding, I think, for me, has really impacted relationships for me as well, with very different kind of people. With that also comes gentleness extended to myself and to other people who might be doing something so different from what you're doing, but to understand that that person is growing through what they're going through, and just extending that gentleness to them as well, because they're a creature of Allah. So that's been quite big for me.
When I think about that lesson, right, and what you're just sharing right now, I am just taken back. I don't think I am surrounded with many different people with doing different crazy things in my physical world. But yeah, that has been very true in my online existence. People are doing very different things, believing very different things, and that can be very difficult to deal with. And yeah, it all goes down to acceptance and understanding that, you know what, they're on their journey, I'm on my journey. And let's support each other through that.
Yes, that's it. Another thing that's really stood out that I've really realized the importance of is slowing down. This actually came about when I went offline for 3 months. I'm still a little bit in that phase, but I'm getting ready to get back. But when I decided to take time off, alhamdulillah that I could, it really showed me the benefit of slowing down and how much beauty and value there is in slowing down and simplifying. It really opened space in my life, emotionally and in my heart, and just mentally as well, where I could nourish myself fully. In this space of time, alhamdulillah, I've been able to work on this podcast as well and really pour my heart into it. Also, it's opened space for reflection in my life, because I realized when I was online, and when you're just constantly available, because I've been doing this for about 2 years now, I haven't taken a break. And one thing that I really want to remind myself to do is to take regular breaks, because it's so important for me to come back and look at who I am, where I'm going, and also look at who I am in front of Allah. Realign myself and my efforts to my vision, as well as how I can best serve my community. So that's been really, I feel like I've really grown in these 3 months.
I think we talked about it in one of our, I don't remember which episode it was. So we talked about this idea of meditation. And, when the Prophet ﷺ used to go and just kind of take himself away from the world and focus on things. And obviously, I think that was your way of meditating after going through that 2 years of insanity that you did. Actually, there's a video I recently watched from Yaqeen Institute on YouTube, and they talked about this idea of meditation from an Islamic perspective, and it just blew my mind. I think that's definitely something I would like to share with you guys, probably in some links on the podcast, on the website. But yeah, it was talking about meditation, where you're separating yourself from the world, you're quiet, but then you are imagining that you're in front of Allah this entire time. So that's what you said. You said something that, who I am in relationship with Allah. And yeah, that was something that's very, part of that. And I was like, what? So that was very insane. I have to practice it still. But I really wanted to know what meditation means in accordance to Islamic guideline. And that was a huge one for me.
An Islamic view of meditation.
Yes.
That should be interesting.
I'll send you the link after this. I forgot to send it to you.
Yes, inshallah.
Will do, inshallah.
I wanted to ask you if you have any other intentions for the year, for yourself or for your life or in general.
For me, as of last year, that's not something I always did, but as of last Ramadan that passed, I was very focused on it, and I had some post-Ramadan intentions. I talked about that. I made a video on it. I talked about it on Instagram, all that, because this is something that I felt it really worked for me. So I am always checking up on those intentions. This is something that I wanted to do. Am I doing them or not? And I realized some of them I'm doing great in. Others I have completely left behind, But I'm comparing myself to that, who I was after Ramadan. And if you've really worked during Ramadan, your state is I did awesome. You're in that mindset that I did really good. And, I can continue this. This idea is always there after Ramadan, I think, if you really try during the month. And so, yeah, so this is my baseline. My baseline is my post-Ramadan intention. My goal right now for a few years has been really to focus on my spirituality. And I know that, when that improves, then everything in life kind of improves. Obviously, I have some goals in life that I'm looking towards and really working towards, and I get hit with the roadblock and hit with another roadblock. But I am hopeful that I will be able to achieve them, and inshallah, when that happens, I will share that with you as well. But I think my main focus though is really becoming a better Muslim.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
As we all are as well.
Yeah.
I also do my goals in Ramadan actually, and then
oh, cool.
Use every the new year for me is going back to that and seeing what it's like and improving that or changing that, adapting it, and creating new ones. But yeah, that is my baseline as well.
Awesome.
So that's really interesting for us to find out. Have you heard of this concept of having a word? Sometimes it can be a word for the month or a word for the year that people set for themselves.
I have. I just yesterday or 2 days ago, I was just looking through my Instagram posts just to see what's going on, whatever. And I went through one, I don't know which month was it, but I shared it. It was the beginning of the month, and I was like, oh, the word or the topic of or something of the month is, I don't even remember what it was now, but I wrote it, and it has zero impact on me to the point that I read it again 2 days ago, and I still don't remember it, And so I know it works for some people, but for me, it does not work at all. Does it work for you?
That's really interesting. I've never done it.
Oh.
But I was thinking about what mine would be if I were to create one.
Yeah.
I think mine would be nourishment. I don't know if I would do it for the whole year. Maybe I would do it 3 months, 4 months. I'm not quite sure because I've never done it before.
That is, yeah. I really like the idea of it, but my mind is just doesn't flow sometimes that way. And so I am okay with that now. I mean, you just have to know what works for you, and you just keep going with that. And if it doesn't work for you, then you leave it. But if it works for someone else, alhamdulillah,
Exactly. You find purpose in what you're doing, and it's okay if it doesn't work for you. If it doesn't work for you, you find your own thing.
And, we're actually, inshallah, going to hopefully start on our season 2. And it's really strange to even talk about it. I thought it was awesome that we made it to season 1. And there was a point where I'm like, I don't know if we were going to make it, but we set a deadline, and we did well with it, alhamdulillah. So how do you feel about season 2, Qudsiyah?
I am super nervous.
So let's say that we're starting to record the first episode of season 2, right? Like what do you want to tell yourself before you start recording?
I don't know. I have to think about that one.
You're like, I need to take a vacation. I'm not there yet, probably. Yeah, it really is that one of those things where, when you start something, that's when you really it hits home. And I know we've actually just briefly written down some topics, but I'm really looking forward to a season 2, and I hope you guys are as well. I think it's going to be awesome. Obviously, we're always looking for your feedback. We're reading your stuff. We're, trying to get better every time. And this is going to be the first recording, and we have made some changes throughout this thing. So I hope you're able to kind of catch up on them. Anything else you want to say before we end our season 1, Qudsiyah?
This is the last episode of the season, but I also want to say that through this podcast, it's been a really big growth journey for Samia and I. And we're growing continually with you guys as well. And I think that's beautiful that we're all just sharing and growing together and making the space for this kind of conversation. We would love to hear from you about any other topics that you think you'd like to hear us talk about. That will be really valuable for us. And yeah, inshallah, see you in season 2.
Yeah, and lastly, most importantly, thank you so much for you, Qudsiyah, and for everyone for listening and joining us and making this something that has been very enjoyable for me, and as you mentioned, as a means of growth, which was our original intention about it. It was supposed to create a space of growth for everyone. So alhamdulillah, and yes, just like you said, see you in season 2.
If there's something that you've benefited from today, we'll be so grateful if you would share it with someone you know and subscribe to the podcast. You can also contact us at Soulful Latte Podcast on Instagram, or write to us at soulfullattepodcast@gmail.com. We would really love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing.